The podcast is about anything from well-known international events to obscure moments in history.
We are not historians, just two longtime friends learning about occurrences that interest us from the 20th century, and then sharing them with each other.
Every episode will each cover a different topic which happened in that year, starting with the year 1900.
Listen to our new show titled This Year in History. And if you're not careful, you just might learn something.
This Year in History is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and all other podcast platforms. Hello, welcome to This Year in History.
Today, Merisa and I will be covering the year 1900. Each one of us will have a different topic. What do you have for us today, Merisa?
The thing I'm going to be talking about today, it happened on June 25th, 1900. There was a monk who by the name of Wang Yanlu, who actually discovered over 60,000 manuscripts. They were found in some caves up in northwestern China. But the thing that's interesting about this, the history of those manuscripts starts all the way back in 2nd century BCE in China. And it actually has to do with the Silk Road. Do you know what the Silk Road is?
I haven't heard of it.
The Silk Road, and not to get it confused, because there was in current times a website on the dark web called the Silk Road. But it was named after the actual Silk Road in China. It's an ancient trade route. It was linking China to the west, so there was a lot of merchants going in and out through that route. And the reason why it's called the Silk Road is because China's biggest trade was silk, so that's where it got its nickname from.
Yeah, I would have assumed that, but I didn't want to be wrong. So, yeah, that's interesting. I knew about that too.
Yeah, and there was all these manuscripts that he found. And it's not just in Chinese. It's actually in a lot of different languages like Hebrew, Sanskrit. Sanskrit's actually it's an Indo-Aryan language that actually goes back like 3,500 years. And also, I don't know if you know who the Uyghurs are, the ethnic minority group that's currently living in China, or they have a huge population. Yeah, I know, because I was looking how to pronounce these words, and when I typed that in, I was just like, Is that right? Like, yeah. Am I saying this right? It's called they're called the Uyghurs.
And how are you spelling that?
It's spelled Uyghur.
Okay, because I've heard that term in the 90s, but it referred to different people.
Yeah, I actually looked up several videos like to make sure that
that's the right pronunciation.
Yeah, because I was like, I don't want to be incorrect on that one.
So but the Uyghurs of China.
So there was a lot of those scriptures included like a Chinese performance literature, writing exercise, census registers, local government documents. They even had like divorce decrees and loan agreements and wills, and they were all just stuffed in these caves. And it's not like pieces of paper like the way you think of paper today. Like the paper was actually invented in China, but the way they use paper, like they would use old rags or bamboo, and they were like they could also be really heavy at times. So all of these manuscripts that they found actually weighed like tons.
Wow.
Yeah, and they even had one of the oldest books of the Diamond Sutra, which is one of the most important books regarding the Buddhist faith. But those were actually produced on xylography, and xylography is actually like wooden carvings.
Okay.
Yeah, and they found that in the cave. And so he actually started to sell those manuscripts to some Western explorers starting like in 1907. Their names, like the two first ones that he sold it to were Ariel Stein and Paul Pillet. But then also like Japan got some, Russia got some Danish explorers got some, but most of them, they're actually kept in China.
Did you get to see what they look like? Are they like scrolls? I picture like a scroll with like maybe bamboo sticks on each end.
No, I saw some of them. They're actually some of them are pretty worn out, and it kind of like I don't kind of reminds me like if it was like imagine if you got a rock and thinned it out as lightly as
Oh
possible and
wow,
then
like a
like drew
rock.
on it. That's how it seemed to me. Like
Oh wow, so it was
I
like a thick paper. It was
yeah, like
like a
yeah, a lot of these are really like they weighed tons. So it wasn't
yeah.
just like a big like the paper we know today. It's not nothing
Oh,
like that.
okay. So it's more like a board, more like
Yeah, yeah.
I
Hmm.
get you. Okay.
Yeah, so most of them remained actually in China, and they're actually in the National Library of China, and you could actually access them online and see them for free and just go over them. Yeah, so and they don't know why those were put in there. There's a lot of theories from it was a sacrilege waste, like they didn't want to throw away any type of religious text because they maybe thought it was inappropriate, so they put
Hmm.
it in a cave. Others thought it was a Buddhist monk library. Others believe because around the 14th and 15th century, the Silk Road actually got very dangerous. So they thought that maybe they stored those away because they were fearing like some type of invasion from certain groups.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I could imagine it was pretty slippery. So
oh yeah, and some of the manuscripts are actually written on silk. So but silk was so expensive, it's not there wasn't a whole lot of manuscripts written on silk because of how expensive it could be compared to other things that we're
well, the
using.
Mormons used gold tablets, so
Oh,
you can't get more.
wow.
Yeah. But that's
Yeah,
another year. We'll talk about that one.
and yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Romans because it's actually when
Did I
the
bring up the
Roman
Romans?
you just said the Romans
Oh
used
no,
go.
Mormons.
Oh, Mormons. I'm sorry, I misheard you. But yeah, it was actually around the time when the Roman Empire was falling that that's when it actually started to get dangerous on the Silk Road.
I see. So what year was that again? They found the, or when do they date back to?
They date back to
I'm asking because they talk about finding like the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff like that. Like, and you mentioned there was different religions, Hebrew, and so that means it made it over there. But back in that time, people in the Middle Eastern area they didn't read or write. So Chinese could read and write. They're literate for centuries way before.
hmm
So if it was written in Hebrew, how is it the Chinese writing this, or is it like?
Well, no, because they're in different languages. So you know what I mean? Like,
I'm just curious about like, okay, so if Hebrews weren't writing during that time period, well, maybe they were. Maybe
it
that's
looks
evidence they
like,
were.
yeah. I think it says because I'm looking it up. The earliest examples of written Paleo Hebrew date from 10th century BCE. So yeah, and the Silk Road started 2 BCE. So they were already reading and writing.
Oh, well, I've learned something today. Cool.
Yeah, yeah. Because I started because there's a like they were talking about Nestorian Christianity
Yeah.
and then Manichaeism. Those are two because I was like, what are these? You know, these are actually religions that actually died out around the 14th century.
Okay.
Yeah, so it has like a whole lot of recording from different. The most of it is in Chinese, but they found a lot that come from different faiths and different languages.
And that was all discovered in 1900. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. All of that was discovered in 1900. All these like over 60,000 manuscripts were discovered in that cave. And it's like it's kind of like it leads you down a rabbit hole. So like you're looking it up and then you're like, well, what is Uyghur? And then you find out, and then Sanskrit, and then Manichaeans, and so it just keeps leading you to different
Yeah, like a rabbit
people with
hole.
different histories. Yeah, and it's like you could get really lost with it.
So it's kind of like the Rosetta Stone of manuscripts.
Yeah, and it's like it's considered like one of the biggest discoveries, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, well, I haven't either. I'm learning about it now. So.
I don't know, I liked reading about it. It's very interesting.
Oh.
Oh, but I will say I only found one book regarding this, but it seems like there was some forgeries actually sold to like Japan and England. But I only found one person talking about that, and when I tried to look for their book, it wasn't available anywhere. So I couldn't see anything else regarding that.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about the authenticity of it.
Yeah, like the ones that have gone outside of China that were sold to to like Japan and other countries and Russia. There, most of them are real, but there were some that weren't. But I think those were actually sold at a later time.
Why do you think these even existed?
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, nobody knows. It's just a theory. Like, they don't know if it was to be a library, to be kind of like to throw away, but not really, not to be sacrilegious.
Maybe someone was collecting it, hoarding it.
Yeah, collecting, hoarding it, or they were scared that there was an invasion coming in, so they kind of wanted all their personal information, I guess, sort of to put it in a modern way. They wanted to seal it up so it wouldn't be destroyed, because there was like divorce decrees and loan agreements and wills and government documents. So
imagine if Genghis Khan like collected them all and that was his little stash. I mean, anything could be possible. That does seem realistic, though.
Yeah, nobody knows the reason why they're in there. Everyone just speculates.
And what part of China is that? North?
It's in northwestern China. It's in the Maogao Caves at Dunhuang.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. What are you going to be talking about today?
Oh, okay. We'll segue into that. It's our first day. So what I have prepared for us today is the Great Galveston hurricane, and regionally in Texas is known as the Great Storm of 1900. So I've been to Galveston. I went there for 2 spring breaks ago. Went camping out on the beach. Sorry?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I've lived in Texas my whole life and I've never been to Galveston.
Yeah, so if you don't know about Texas geography, Galveston is an island off like the appendix of Houston. At the time, in the year 1900, it was actually the highest populated city in all of Texas, which is kind of baffling knowing how small it is now. Back then, it was founded in 1883, and at the time it had about 37,000 people, which of course made it the highest populated city in Texas. And they were trying to make it like the New York City of the South, because it was a big port area, like in the Gulf of Mexico. So they're trying to make it so like, hey, this is our New York City. It would have been interesting seeing if they put like a statue up and all that, like a welcoming statue. But they never got to that, and I'll tell you why. Because 1883 is when it was founded. Of course, 1900 is when they had the Galveston 1900, the Great Galveston Hurricane. I'm going back and forth of which I call it, the Great Galveston Hurricane or the Great Storm of 1900. The Great Storm of 1900, I think, is more fitting for today's topic. It happened on the 8th of September, 1900. It killed over 8,000 people.
Wow.
And then people never fully recovered from it, no, financially or in any way. Like I said, the highest population at the time was about 37,000 people.
And there wasn't any type of like warning, like...
Well, there was actually. So Cuba, the same hurricane went through Cuba. So the Cubans saw it coming. It went through them, and then they warned the American service. But because the American service didn't trust Cuban forecasters at the time, because they were bitter, even though it was like scaling the U.S. coast and heading directly towards Galveston and only Galveston. Yeah, they just kind of ignored it and dismissed it. And they were like looking at the clouds and probably like licked a finger and stuck up in the air or something, or whatever they did back then. And or looked at the little the flags, or I don't know what they did. But the interesting thing is it kind of scaled the coast. So it came up to like where Florida's at and scaled the coast of the United States along the Gulf of Mexico, and then hit directly towards Galveston. Like the eye of a storm went through Galveston. So it was heading directly there. And yeah, it was pretty violent. Like the people who recorded this information never saw or experienced anything like that before this. You got to think it's still only been around for about 13 years. Or no, I'm doing my math wrong. 17 years. Mm-hmm. So, it was recorded that they had like high tides at first and winds up to about 130 miles per hour. And they had like tiles that were shot off the roofs of the houses and the buildings, and they became like projectiles. So people were getting killed with these like ceramic tiles that were shattering into shards.
Oh my God.
And hitting people. It was coming right off the roofs into the people. And now also, to make things worse, the highest point above sea level, guess what it is, first of all? What would you guess?
The highest point above sea level is 60,000 feet.
Oh no, I meant in Galveston.
Oh, in Galveston,
That's interesting. You
200
know that,
feet.
no? 200? No. It was 8.7 feet.
Oh.
So everyone's like pretty much on flat, like they're on the beach pretty much. And this is an island, so it's very small. There's not much, mass to it. Well, first of all, the aftermath of it caused Galveston, just people to leave Galveston for good. Like they really couldn't recover from it. The remaining people that were there, they built some of the buildings back up, and they raised the buildings about 17 feet above sea level. So that helps a lot because there was about 3 feet of flooding throughout the whole city. So everything was flooded. A lot of the buildings were destroyed. They lost about 3,600 buildings.
Wow.
Yeah, if you go to Galveston now, like when I went there a couple of years ago, you'll notice that all the houses along the beach front are on stilts. Mm-hmm. They're up pretty high, like they have these staircases going up. And I'm assuming it's from that. They've learned their lesson. There's a popular story about the St. Mary's Orphan Asylum, where there's an orphanage which held 93 orphans and 10 nuns. There's a few stories about that, like when that was happening. They had 2 different orphanages. They had one for the boy, one for the girls. The girls' one was newly built and a little bit stronger. So they took all the boys, everyone went to the girls' orphanage, where they hid and provided under the provided shelter. And there's a story there where the nuns sang a song called Queen of the Waves to protect the children and to calm them down. So it was like a prayer song. And also now, if you go to Galveston, I don't know if it's the only Walmart, but the Walmart they have there is put up in place of that old orphanage. And there's people, if you go to that Walmart, and I really want to check this out, and maybe we should do that, make a little trip over there and talk to the people of Walmart.com and ask them about the haunted children. Or there's stories. I was looking it up, and there's like people saying like, "Oh yeah, I was stocking some shelves, and a balloon just came into the aisle, and the string was held in place."
They're ghost hunting Walmart employees.
Yeah. They're like, the kids are like bringing balloons to them. I don't know why, but and then sometimes the kids giggle a little bit.
It's not children that are shopping in the store.
I don't know. Why do they say children? I don't understand about that ghost. Like,
because it's more scary when it's kids.
Yeah. Not a nun. I think a nun would be scarier.
I don't think
ghost
so.
nun?
No.
But they're happy. They're always... Why is it people are scared of like giggling children?
Have you ever seen Pet Sematary? Like the original one? Okay, well.
I don't know. But if you go there, if you go to that Walmart, there's a plaque out there about the... We'll say the St. Mary's Orphan Asylum. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It was a devastating storm. And this is also before they started naming hurricanes. So
okay.
Yeah, now it's a boy's name, it's a girl's name, it's alphabetical order, and they go back and forth. But then they didn't have names for hurricanes. I don't know when that began, but at this point, they just called it the Great Storm of 1900.
Do you know, like, is that like the biggest hurricane in America, or was Katrina bigger than that?
The highest winds went up to 145 miles per hour, 230 kilometers per hour. I don't do they grade hurricanes the way they do with earthquakes? They have like a number.
Yeah, category like 1 through 5.
There we go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can get that. I don't remember seeing that.
Well, I mean, like the death toll, is that the largest? Like,
I'm assuming yes, because they were very unprepared. Yes,
okay.
They're definitely the highest death toll. Again, it was 8,000 people died. I don't know. Was Katrina more than that? Katrina could have been a lot more than that. But for a population of 37,000 people, 8,000 is a huge chunk of the population.
Yeah, that's a huge, and especially at that time.
Yes, when people were and that was the biggest city in Texas. So most people. Sorry?
Katrina actually had 1,833 deaths.
Whoa. So yeah, this had a lot more by far, 8,000. But everyone drowned. They were hit with projectile tiles, and they drowned because the houses were only like 2 or 3 stories, most of them 1 story, and they were only 8 feet above sea level. There's 1 hour where it was up to their knees, like they're about 2 feet high in flooding. And then
Jesus.
within 10 minutes, it went up another foot.
Oh
And they
my
had to move.
goodness.
They moved everyone upstairs and everything. So I read a few stories on this. Any other questions? I don't know if I left anything out. Anything that would be interesting to the audience.
Yeah,
But,
I'm actually I'm looking at it, and Galveston, for at least the U.S., is number one. Maria, which happened not too long ago, is actually number 3. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I've been to Galveston, like I said before, very small area. I went camping on the beach, well, off the beach, and the only thing I remember are the giant mosquitoes, these giant like housefly size, like they had weight to them, and so I had a miserable time there because I wanted to go out camping, have a little fire,
Yeah.
but I'm just swatting away these heavy, giant mosquitoes that left these giant welts on me. And so I just got annoyed and pissed off. The whole time I'm just swatting, trying to enjoy myself. So I ended up inside the tent, and it was humid and miserable. I think we went in spring break, so it was about March or April, probably March. But it was still pretty humid. But yeah, don't know if I'd go again. There's not much there to. But you know what? I will say that there was a place called the Kima Boardwalk, which was really nice, little carnival area, rides and stuff like that, and it's good for children.
Why didn't you bring any type of like mosquito repellent?
I did.
Oh,
it didn't do anything.
Work.
No,
they became immune.
they're big, giant, angry. Like, you know how mosquitoes are meant to be stealthy and you don't know they're on you?
Yeah.
These ones, they didn't care. They just like they were these big, heavy, like 1 ounce or like probably weighed like a gram. They were already filled, like a giant belly filled with blood, and then they're drinking more. But yeah, that's my memory of Galveston. Not a place I'd go again. But I did the Houston experience, you know. But I thought that would be a good first one because I have been, you know, we are living in San Antonio. So I've been here 18 years now. You've been here your whole life. Mm-hmm. So I thought Galveston would be a good beginning episode or a good beginning topic for this episode. But yeah, that's the Galveston, the Great Galveston Hurricane or the Great Storm of 1900.
And if we said anything incorrectly, feel free to email us at thisyearinhistorypodcast@gmail.com. And we'll be sure to correct it in the next episode.
That's right. We have an email and everything's spelled correctly. No Z's or Z's or no $signs. Just thisyearinhistory@gmail.com.
No, This Year in History podcast. Make sure you include podcast because that one was already taken.
I missed that one. So thank you, Merisa.
No problem.
All right. So next time we're going to do 1901.
Oh, yeah. And just a few more tidbits that actually happened in 1900. One of them was Milton Hershey actually introduced the milk chocolate Hershey bar in 1900. So thank you for that. And also, a German theoretical physicist by the name of Max Planck actually discovered the law of black body radiation, which led to the quantum mechanics revolution. And Albert Einstein actually got a Nobel Prize for explaining photoelectric effect. So
yeah, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't either. So, but I was like, it's Albert Einstein.
That sounds like an interesting one for season 2 if we get that.
Oh, yes. I'm going to admit something. I was going to do the Max Planck one because I love anything science, even if it's difficult. I want to learn it.
Yeah.
I was reading about it, right? I even read there was like the short 37-page book I found on Amazon. And I was looking at videos and I couldn't put it in a way to describe it that, you know, in a very simple example or metaphor to describe what Max Planck did. And it's like if you get into it, you have to get into classical physics, and then you have to get into the way light changes as it gets hot, but like there's more to it, and it just like was too much, and I could not, there's no way I could explain this, so yeah. I had to go with the manuscripts.
Yeah. Well, I have a few things too. Other things that happened in 1900. Mm-hmm. L. Frank Baum publishes The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Jack London publishes The Call of the Wild. 2 big books that year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Also, territories. Hawaii becomes U.S. territory for the first time.
In 1900?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking of a state. Okay.
No, territory. So I think the state was in 1949.
I believe so, yeah.
Man, I think I know that. Holy shit. 1949, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you can look it up even if you want to right now, Merisa. But yeah, it becomes U.S. territory. So like how Puerto Rico is U.S. territory.
It became a state in 1959.
Oh, I got it. I was only a decade away. I knew it had 9 in it, and a 9 and a 1. 2 9s and a 1. Got that much right. Also, the Cook Islands becomes British territory. Winston Churchill is elected to Parliament. And one of my favorites, the other topic I was going to do, I'll probably say for season 2, is Count Zeppelin, or Der Graf, which means the Count. I believe so. I think it's Der Graf. Anyway, the Count Zeppelin, and he was actually a count, if you know what a count is. Not an accountant, but, you know, like the guy from Sesame Street, or a vampire. Okay.
Did he wear a cape?
I think so, because that's the way they showed their wealth, isn't it?
I don't know.
They have all this property, counts. Well, counts are really big in German and Eastern European countries. So, anyway, Count Zeppelin, I just wanted to say Count Zeppelin, launches the first Zeppelin flight ever, which is a very interesting one. I watched this Amazon Prime documentary on airships, and you want to know where the Zeppelin came from? It was Count Zeppelin.
Well, don't give too much away. We've got to save some for season 2.
Yeah, his name is Ferdinand Graf von Zeppelin. But yes, that's what happened in 1900. I'm sure there's a lot more that happened, but that's for you to find out.
Alrighty, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in 1901.
See you there. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.